Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, I want to pick up with where we left off last week, which is a discussion about this 2020 hurricane season. So this is a list of all of the named systems, except for one. We did have very early this morning Tropical Storm Teddy form out in the Central Atlantic, and I'll show you that in just a few moments. But I want to just revisit an idea that we've been discussing, and that is, even though we've had two very impactful systems, for example, you can see here that the total accumulated cyclone energy for Hurricane Laura and also for Isaias has been quite high. Many of the other systems, which have gotten to be tropical storm strength and therefore have got names, have not added a lot to our accumulated cyclone energy numbers so far this year. So even though we have almost completely exhausted our name list, speaking of that accumulated cyclone energy, we're right about average. But the point is, we still have the whole second half of the hurricane season to go. We need to be talking about what's here in the near term and what are some of the bigger drivers moving forward. I want to start with the bigger drivers first. So I'm going to show you this animation. This starts here on May 31st of this year, and it goes through, as you can see here, through September the 12th. Now, there are, of course, several things that you start to see, first of which is probably the blues stretching right in the middle of the image. That, of course, would be our developing La Nina. And I'll tell you, our trade winds right now are strong. There's plenty of cool water beneath this that is surfacing, and as you watch again, you can see that whole area really developing a cooler flavor to it, if you will. And therefore, I expect this La Nina to be around for the rest of fall and in through winter, and probably be one of the more dominant features to be discussing for our fall and upcoming winter pattern. And we're going to, at the end, talk about what this means for South America. But notice how warm the ocean temperatures are here in our main development region. So that's the Western Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean. In fact, if I just step you back, there's something kind of neat to see here. When Hurricane Laura went through at the end of August, the cool water that you see here is what we call a cold water trail. The Gulf of Mexico was able to recover from that in about 5 to 6 days, and it went right back over to near average, and then now is back over to warmer than average temperatures, which means that we are able to very quickly get our ocean temperatures back into a configuration that supports tropical cyclone development quickly. The atmosphere is in support of this as well. Looking at vertical wind shear, now remember, hurricanes do not thrive in environments with high vertical wind shear. Well, since the beginning of September, the vertical wind shear numbers have been coming down. We can see that for the whole of the tropical Atlantic, and also a major drop-off here in the Gulf of Mexico. So this is important. These numbers represent what the atmosphere and ocean are capable of doing in terms of making tropical systems. So while we're so concerned about the flooding rains out of tropical systems in the southeast, the West has been on fire, as I'm sure you've been hearing about in the news. And this satellite animation is from the day on Sunday. And you'll notice as the sun sets here, watch this, there it goes, you'll be able to see the extensive amount of smoke that is still across the western United States. Meanwhile, while that is occurring, here is the upper level low that went through the midsection of the country last week, leaving its frontal boundary here. This, of course, is Tropical Storm Sally, which probably by the end of the day will be Hurricane Sally. And this is Hurricane Paulette, which is going over Bermuda early this morning. I'll take a look at that in just a few moments. All right. Update here on Sally. We watched it go across the southern tip of Florida, and then last night as it got into the Gulf of Mexico, this is about as healthy of a system as I've seen in terms of its development from tropical storm status later today to become a hurricane. And what I mean here is we can see in infrared very, very cold cloud tops here. So this tells me that the thunderstorms, the convection underneath this broad shield of cirrus here is quite healthy. So we expect later today for likely an eye to begin to open up, because if I notice the outside of this, there's very good there's very good outflow in the upper levels of the atmosphere, exhausting that heat away. So we're going to watch this very, very carefully as it moves right here toward the mouth of the Mississippi River. Now, the latest guidance on this from the European model, which over the weekend showed the best consistency, takes this, like I said, right toward the mouth of the Mississippi River and then over to the Alabama-Mississippi border. And it's at that point that the remnants of this will begin to track across parts of Alabama, Georgia, and then get into the Carolinas, where we are anticipating some very, very heavy rainfall. You can see that that forecast is echoed over there on the right from the National Hurricane Center, possibly Category 1 or Category 2 in strength as it makes landfall. Therefore, just to keep you aware, we're looking at from the mouth of the Mississippi over here to the border. So from here to here, possibly 7 to 11 feet of storm surge. Those winds will likely not extend all the way into the Carolinas, but as you can see, gusts here approaching 100 miles an hour, and there'll be a narrow corridor in through this area where we will see 45 to 70 mile an hour winds out of this. Again, this is a 5-day accumulated wind gust map. So we notice that the strongest winds don't make it all the way over to the Carolinas, but could still be windy out of this system. Now, just something to think about for Mississippi and Alabama where this is coming through. Remember, we have got about half the cotton in open bowl at this point. So given the winds and the rainfall that we're anticipating, which you can see here, this could potentially be disastrous for the cotton crop in that area, plus the other crops that are grown there. So how much are we anticipating? Well, the European model right now has got possibly up to 20 inches right along the coast. But follow with me this eastern side of the cyclone right in through here. You see the European model puts down into parts of the Carolinas, especially into that corridor, something between 3 and 7 plus inches of rainfall by the time we get toward the end of this week. So this will be a slow mover, but we'll watch it get over to us and potentially add quite a bit of rainfall. Now, is that particular forecast echoed in the GFS model? We can take a look here and see that the GFS takes the main rainfall a little bit farther to the north, so you can see it kind of runs into the Appalachian Mountains where they're anticipating 2 to 5 inches of rain, but much lower amounts. Look at the difference right in through here where I just drew that line. That would be the GFS model. That's the European. Much different. By the way, the maps in the background are the same projection. This is the European. This is the GFS. So we do have some variability in our end of week forecast here for how much rainfall we could get in the Carolinas. But I'll tell you, if I had to pick a model at this point, I would pick what the European is saying our potential for greater than 2 to 3 inches of rainfall is very high. Maybe some locations picking upwards of 5 or 6 inches out of this when it's all said and done. So watch these forecasts evolve throughout the end of this week. From there, I would like to show you what we did get over the last 7 days. Remember, we did already have that strong easterly flow last week. And because of that, right here along the coast, there were some storms that produced some locally extremely heavy rainfall. So there are places that just as of late had already had quite a bit of rainfall. So this could really be increasing our flooding threat as we move forward. And just a point to bring up here, we always go back and verify which models are doing the best. I don't always present it to you because it does take some time, but I'd like to explain to you why I'm favoring the European model in the forecast. Because a week ago, this was the forecast for precipitation from the European model. Now just look at North Carolina, for example, the map over here on the right. This is what happened, okay? And this is what was forecast. You see, the GFS, which is over there on the left, while it had similar shape and pattern, was not as accurate as the European. That's why I tend to focus much more on the European and the longer range forecast. Now, it's not as though the European did perfect. It certainly missed a lot of things just to your west, but overall, it was the much better model when it comes to verification. So when I see it putting down heavy rainfall into this area, I am expecting that the National Weather Service will take the flood threat that they have currently in this area and expand it to get into the Carolinas as we work throughout the rest of this week. Other than that, with the hurricane coming in here, the other major factors are some colder weather across the northern tier of the states and the fires that are out in the west. I just want to show you those really quickly. This is from our other satellite called GOES 17. You can see the extent of the fire yesterday across the west, looking at that smoke. And these 2 upper level lows that are spinning here in the western part of the United States, the 1 upper level low, but 2 surface circulations, will be moving across the northwest, helping to fight that fire here in the over throughout the rest of this week. But let's see where all of that ends up by going first to the upper levels of the atmosphere. So this is going to be very instructive on our temperature and precipitation patterns. What we see right now today, okay, so here is Sally, that is Paulette, okay, that's what these 2 features are. These are the much deeper lows just off the Aleutian Islands, the big ridge into Alaska and a deep low off the west coast. So highly amplified, slow moving pattern. So what ends up happening, I just played all the way through Thursday. And all that really changed here was that we developed a low over the Hudson Bay. That's going to be critical for our end of week temperature pattern and steering what is left, right here, see it? What is left of Sally toward the Carolinas. Now, after that goes through, let's get to Friday into the weekend. Look where the ridge is. It's back in the midsection of the country into the Canadian prairies. That means the whole of the East Coast, as we work toward the end of this week and start next week, is going to possibly be on the cooler side of things for the East Coast. We will then see very slowly that ridge move toward the Great Lakes, but that'll be over the weekend. We're going to hang on to our cooler bias here into the weekend. And that trough that brought in the much needed rainfall to the Pacific Northwest starts to slide into the middle part of the country. Now you're looking at this going, well, there'll be a big ridge here to start next week. Well, there will, but unfortunately, you're going to be on the wrong side of this, and as a result, have some cooler air that sticks around for a while. And I'm going to show you that in just a few moments. But as I play this out longer term, now we're out to the 22nd, 23rd, 24th of the month. So this is all about 10 days from now. I continue to see troughs redeveloping here between the Aleutian Islands and the Gulf of Alaska. So it tends to just throw the jet stream back up into a ridge in the west and let it dip down here over the east. I'm going to show you the consequences of that both with temperature and precipitation in a moment. First, that smoke from those wildfires, while we will likely not see to North and South Carolina, I just want you to know that smoke will spread all the way from the Pacific Northwest to the northeastern part of the United States. And I'm right here in Illinois, and I have seen some crazy sunsets the last couple of nights, extremely hazy, blocking out a lot of that short wavelength light like the blues and greens. And as a result, we've had very reddish, orangish, yellowish sunsets. Well, you can just see the extent of the smoke from the wildfires in the western United States. Okay, let's get into this now, a much more detailed look here at our precipitation. Our high resolution models, let's pause it right here. This is early this morning. What we're going to see is as we work through the day today, you're going to have scattered storms coming in out of the north, okay, see that? And they're going to sit right here on a boundary that's focused right across the state of North Carolina. So in the Appalachian Mountains, widely scattered storms this afternoon across the central part of the state moving over toward the east. So there you go. You can see them moving through this afternoon and this evening. Now after that, that moisture gets pulled into Sally, and you're going to get through Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon and evening relatively dry. But what we're doing is we're waiting on Sally to get through Mississippi and Alabama by 6 a.m. Wednesday and start to make its way over toward Georgia, Tennessee, and the Appalachian Mountains by Wednesday midday. And that's when things are going to get quite wet. So backing this up and just looking through the next 5 days, I want to show you the differences in the models. You can see big section of the U.S. and Canadian prairies are dry. All the focus is going to be right down here. But like I told you earlier, there are differences between the ECMWF, that's the European model which you see here, and the GFS, which is there. Both bringing in substantial rainfall, but the European is much wetter. I just wanted to stress that point. So what else is going on in the tropics? Well, the answer is a lot. As you can see here, we're monitoring 7 different regions right now as we hit the peak of the hurricane season. And I'll just point out to you where a lot of these things are going. First of all, Paulette, nothing to worry about here. If you look at this animation, it's going right over the top of Bermuda early this morning. So there's the eye of a Category 1 strength hurricane going over Bermuda, but it's staying out to open ocean. So watch, Paulette is here. This is Teddy, which is going this direction. Sally is there, and we're going to watch another wave coming off of Africa very soon. Now, the very good news about Teddy is what you see over here. Through the end of this week, although Teddy is forecast to become a major hurricane, the steering currents are taking Teddy north. I was concerned last week that Teddy was going to come over here toward the Lesser Antilles and then do something like this, okay? At this point, Teddy is now making a much harder turn north, and it's partly due to trough sweeping through like this and higher pressure here, which might pull Teddy around. Now, next Monday, when we're talking again, we'll have to make sure that Teddy, of course, stayed out to open ocean, but there is still quite a bit of uncertainty, and it's not to say that this system can't turn back over toward the U.S. just yet. It's just that the guidance is favoring keeping it out to open ocean, which is a very good thing. So our only near-term threat from tropical cyclone activity will actually be coming from the west. That'll be Sally. All right. What about week 2? Well, the GFS is on the left, European is on the right. You can see that both of them are favoring drier conditions, and you're going to see in a few moments cooler as well. But I'll just tell you something. You can see the models in through here favoring wet conditions. We will not have a solid picture on a week 2 tropical cyclone. It's just impossible right now. So just watch the tropics carefully. They're going to continue to stay very active, and that's a point we tried to prove at the beginning of this video. Now let's talk temperatures. As we put in last week's video, the cold air that came in early last week really extended pretty far to the south, almost clipping parts of the cotton belt. But as you can see here, it extended into the high plains and a broad sector here of the northern part of the United States, hitting North and South Dakota, northern Minnesota, with several hours below freezing. That's what this map is showing you, hours below freezing. From there, let's take a look at what the temperatures are going to do, because it has already rebounded in that area up into the 90s for today. Across the state of North Carolina, we're looking at 80s, low 80s today. As we play this forward, this is where the cloud cover begins to extend, and you can already see the cooler weather on Tuesday, now getting into Wednesday and Thursday. So we have a week here of the 70s. Now it'll be toward the end of the week that the heavier precipitation's coming through, but at the same time, after Sally gets out of the way, big high pressure cell builds into the Great Lakes states, and as it sweeps through on Saturday into Sunday, sorry, I went kind of faster. There's Saturday's highs, see that? And now getting into Sunday's highs around 70. Let's talk about what's going on there, but first I'm going to show you those overnight low temperatures. So we know that this is what we got Monday into Tuesday, but as we get in toward Wednesday, we're talking about 50s in the center part of North Carolina. This is Thursday's low temperatures. Watch this. Here comes Friday. That's the colder air advancing. This is now Saturday and Sunday. So we're going to be seeing our overnight lows here, possibly in parts of central North Carolina, getting right down to that 50-degree mark on Sunday morning, which could be pretty chilly. From there, let's just take a look at the feature that I'm most concerned about. It's this big high pressure cell that shows up by Saturday. So you know that the winds around high pressure cells go around in a clockwise fashion. So that's going to be bringing much drier air down from the northeast. And we might see our dew point temperatures here get into the 30s. So very dry air wrapping around this high pressure cell that you see here for our weekend. And so with that, you also should expect to see the cooler weather continue. In the 6 to 10 day forecast, look at this. We're looking at possibly a 5 to 10 degree cool bias across the Carolinas here. It's in the European model as well. And as we even stretch this out to the 11 to 15 day, we see that same pattern setting up here for the Carolinas, although the ECMW is a bit more generous with heat across the midsection of North America. Well, what about these features is really pushing things forward, The most dominant thing is, of course, going to be La Nina. The strong trade winds, this positive southern oscillation index, and this change in the atmospheric angular momentum, all a consequence of what's going on with La Nina. So let's just take a look at what the latest CFSV2 model is suggesting. Now, I'll tell you this, the ECMWF and the CFSV2 for week 3 and 4, so week 3 is on top, week 4 is on bottom, they're both trying to keep stuff going in the tropics, right? At this point, though, whether or not it is truly dry here is up in the air. That's just not a solid forecast at this point. But I will tell you that the models have trended back over toward a warmer pattern into week 3 and week 4 for the Carolinas. In fact, for a broad sector of North America as we then get out of September and into October. So remember, we take these long-range forecasts with a bit of a grain of salt, but I want to come back to a discussion about what that La Nina is and what it means, because this is our forecast for October. So I showed you this last time, but this is the mean precipitation forecast, so the average for the month of October. One thing is clear, we're keeping this area and this area wet, which means tropical cyclone activity is going to continue to stay high. But I want to talk to you about some other model information we now have that I didn't have last week. You see, while the tropics are anticipated to stay active in the national multi-model ensemble, much of the interior of the country could stay dry if the tropics don't influence it, okay? This is also echoed in the international multi-model ensemble, although they're a bit wetter along the coast, suggesting more interaction with tropical cyclones. From there, I want to talk to you about the pattern. Now, this is interesting. Last week, of course, we got the new European model data, and look at what it favored. A large ridge developing here between the Canadian Maritimes back toward the Great Lakes and Hudson Bay. There was a trough between Greenland and Europe. There was a trough in this part of Alaska, and a trough here kind of over the tip of the Aleutian Islands with a big ridge in this area. Now, why stress all of that? Well, 2018 had a large ridge that sat right here and a trough that sat here and heavy rainfall in the midsection of the country. What I'm trying to tell you is 2020 doesn't look anything like 2018. What about 2019, last year? Well, that was a year that had a deep trough that cut into this part of the country, midsection of the United States. Tons of moisture pumping up out of the south and out of the Gulf of Mexico, which then really just made this whole sector of the country quite wet. And at times we were very warm during October in North and South Carolina. This doesn't look anything like what we've got coming up for October of 2020. But what does look similar is this. You see this ridge, downstream trough, upstream trough, upstream trough. Well, in our most hyperactive hurricane years, you can see them listed here. There was a ridge here, downstream trough, upstream trough, upstream trough. You see, the atmosphere is advertising a very similar pattern to let quite a bit of tropical cyclone activity close to the United States. This is just a continuation of a discussion we've been having. Combine that with how the El Nino-La Nina region continues to stay cool, hence La Nina. And we see above average ocean temperatures here and here. These things are really lending toward an increased amount of activity in the tropics through the month of September and also into October as well. So don't let your guard down just yet. You can see this one last time here by looking at the October outlook from the European model. It's wet all in this area, as you can see. And our guiding high pressure cell is here, which means it will be open for the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico to send systems toward the United States coast. All right. Last thing I want to point out, it's dry in South America. Tomorrow, they are allowed to start planting beans in the midsection of Brazil. But given the dry conditions they've had and the fact that the forecast is really dry for the next 10 days and no major monsoonal moisture returning back into this area, we'll probably delay the planting of soybeans at least another 15 days, possibly more. In fact, the longer-term outlook for now all the way through October 10th continues to show this section, which includes Mato Grosso, that's our biggest soybean and corn and cotton producing state, continues to show them dry through the beginning of October. Now, the rains will return. What this particular map says is that the odds of having them plant rapidly and early is pretty low. Those odds are pretty low at this point. Now, beyond that, take a look at this next animation. This is going to be a 3-month sliding window for South America, beginning October, November, December, then going November, December, January, and so on and so forth, all the way through January, February, March. As I play it for you again, what I want you to notice is, with that developing La Nina we started off talking about, we are anticipating potential problems with drought developing in Argentina and southern Brazil. So this is something we need to watch very, very carefully because we know how influential the South American growing season is on U.S. markets. So from there, I'm going to wrap it up. Hope you all have a great week, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Also, just be very weather aware toward the end of the week as the remnants of Sally move across North and South Carolina. Keep a close eye on the radar. Thank you so much.